Okay, but in all seriousness, this was a really fun tournament and I'm going to give you the report of how it went down. I got a lot of hands to discuss, so I'll get right into it. Here we found our starting stack, which is at 12k, which is considerably better than the average, which is 5.8k. And the reason we started with more stack is because we had some very nice results in the weekly tournaments throughout the year. In one of the first hands, I got dealt 9-3 suited, and me and my friends handled this hand the same way as Doyle Brunson handles his 10 deuce. And this is a result of me busting against my buddy Florian in this same tournament last year for more than half the chips in play when he was holding 9-3.
Well, long story short, where we're from, it's a mandatory open.
So we raised to 120, the cutoff calls, and the big blind calls. The flop comes ace-jack-7, and apart from never going to win this hand if we check, we as pre-flop aggressor are also most likely to have hit this board. So therefore I bluff for 160 and that gets me the pots.
A few hands later we get 9-3 again, and this time there's an under the gun limp. It folds around to us in small blind and we raise it up to 260. The big blind calls and the limper folds. So we go heads up to a flop which brings 9-3-5 with two spades. I decide to bet out 270. The big blind calls. Turn is an offsuit king. I continue betting for 600 and my opponent quickly calls again. And river is another 9, so we got a full house now. And we gotta decide how much value we can extract. And I decide to go for 1600. And again he quickly calls. I show my hand and he shows us king 6 of spades. So we do take that one. A few hands later I get king queen under the gun plus 1. The under the gun player limps for 60. I raise it up to 220. And this is, by the way, definitely a hand that you could consider folding if you are at a full table. But at this point I think we were 7-handed or something. So I think it's definitely fine as a raise then. The middle position player calls and the hijack calls and the under the gun player also calls. So we go 4 ways to a flop, which comes queen 9-10 with 2 clubs. So definitely not the cleanest board to have top pair on, but definitely a board I want to bet on because I don't want to give a free card to all the kinds of draws that people could have right now. So I bet 550 and only the middle position player calls. The turn is a offsuit king and I decide to check on this card because I don't think I will get value from much worse hands, especially not 2 times. I can also always decide to bet on the river. But my opponent checks behind. And the river is a brick. And I decide that I could go for some value now, so I bet 850, but my opponent folds. Now as we get back from the break, I get 3-4 of hearts and I decide to raise it up to 250. This is definitely not the standard play, but I like to mix these hands in sometimes just to keep yourself unpredictable for your opponents. And my opponent on the button calls. So we go to a flop and it comes 9-3-3 with 2 spades. With what I have been showing my opponent so far, I seem to be getting called very light, so I decide to bet out immediately. I bet 220. My opponent, however, raises to 600. Now this is a very weird play by him because I don't think he will ever be having a 3 when he called my pre-flop raise. So actually the only thing that could make sense for value here would be pocket 9s. Maybe he would be playing just a 9 like this, and if so, I would like him to continue to do that. And then there's of course a bunch of flush draws that he could have and some complete airballs. So I decide to just call and give him an opportunity to keep bluffing at it. The turn is an offsuit 8, and I check to my opponent and he bets 800 this time. Now, it doesn't really look like he wants a fold when he bets this small, but of course I'm going to call with my 3 of a kind. Could also consider raising, but in case he has a bluff, it will end there and I want him to continue bluffing if that is what he's doing. So I just call and check to him on the river. River is a 10 of spades, however, which does complete the flush. And this time he bets 1200. Now, I really don't like this river card, but again, he bets so small, I'm just going to have to call it off. So I call, and he shows me Jack 7 of hearts for the runner straight. Interesting. I don't get any hands for a very long time, and the big blind is already up to 300. When I find myself looking at pocket 8s on the button, I decide how much to raise, but I see that my opponent in the big blind only has around 2700 in his stack. So I raise to 740, planning to go all in with this player. But he just calls, which is interesting since that is about a quarter of his stack. And the flop comes ace 6-6. Now my opponent leads into me for all of his chips, which is about 2400, which is interesting because I think that he would be putting any ace all in pre-flop for this stack size. And I also think that he thinks that I have a very wide range, which is probably true. And that therefore there is a huge chance that I would have missed this flop. So I decide to call with my 8s. But he shows me ace 8. So we only got one out. And we do not hit it, unfortunately. But that's a small pot we lose there. Now that last hand put us down to around 13k. And my opponent in the under the gun position raises to 1k now. And I find myself with pocket 5s on the button. I decide to make the call. And everyone else folds. The flop comes king 7-5. And my opponent continues for 1400. Since the flop is rainbow and there's not really that much draw, so I have to be afraid of, I decide to just call and slow play it in position. The turn brings a 9, that does create a flush draw, but my opponent decides to check now. I decide to bet 3000, but my opponent folds. Now with 8 players left, it folds around to the button, who goes all in for 5.5 blinds. This player got crippled by losing an all in. And it folds to me, and I got a decision to make with queen 4 suited. Now this is not a good hand, but with the odds that we're getting and the amount of hands that the player on the button could put all in, I think that we are gonna have to call this. So I decide to call. And my opponent opens king 10 suited. The flop brings a 10, so we are drawing very slim now. However, the turn brings a miracle queen, and the hand holds up. So we bust the player on the button by being gloriously lucky. But what was even more glorious about it is that it was my buddy Florian who busted me from the tournament last year. Not this time, buddy. Now as we progress, another 2 players bust and we are with only 5 players left on the literal bubble when the following hand happens. The under the gun player opens it up for 3100 and the small blind goes all in for 23,000. I'm in the big blind and I look down at pocket aces, so I make the call and the other player folds. My opponent opens queen jack suited, and if there was ever an important all in to win for me, it was this one. The flop is not clean, however. It's king 10-5 with 2 hearts, king 10 of hearts. So we have to fade an ace, a 9 and a heart. Turn is an offsuit 8, so we need to dodge 13 outs, but the river is the 9 of diamonds, which gives my opponent a straight and puts our stack to only about 4 blinds. In the next hand I got king 5 suited in a small blind. It folds around to me. I decide to go all in because I got only 3 or 4 blinds left. And my girlfriend in the big blind decides to call. Oh, by the way, meet my girlfriend. So she called me with pocket 10s and the flop comes all hearts, no king. Turn is a heart, so I'm already drawing that. Luckily, we did make a deal where the bubble gets 400 euros, so that's sort of a consolation, but the ending was really not nice for us. Okay, before we wrap this up, I got a few announcements to make. First of all, next Monday, on October 8th, me and my girlfriend Danny will be playing in a charity event. It will be a tournament with a 250 euro buy-in, and 20% of the prize pool will be going to Pink Ribbon, which is a corporation that helps fund cancer research. So if you want to also help cancer research, definitely come play in the tournament too. Second of all, this denotes the end of the 5-week Platinum Pass challenge which I was partaking in. And what does that mean for these vlogs? Well, actually nothing, because I'm just going to keep making them. There are definitely some more places that I want to go. There's definitely going to be some Vegas at some point, and I got some ideas lined up too, so stay tuned for that. Now, I already wanted to make some sort of vlog, and then this challenge came along, and that really pushed me over the edge. So I really want to thank Andrew Nemi, Jeff Gross, Bill Perkins, PokerStars, and anyone else who is involved in this challenge for making it possible. Now, I watched some of the other vloggers participating in this challenge, and I gotta say there are some really good ones out there who would all be very deserving of the platinum package. Now, if I am to somehow win it, I'm definitely going to take my mother with me to show her first-handedly that I'm doing more than fine. And also, it would be a great opportunity for me, since I usually only play in tournaments and cash games with buy-ins of around a maximum of 400 to 500, since I responsibly manage my bankroll, as you all should. And playing for 25,000 euros, that would just be a great opportunity for me. Once again, thanks to everyone who was involved in this challenge and everyone watching this. Whether we win it or not, nothing will change. I'll just see you next week.